I want you to picture something with me, like right from the jump here.
Okay.
Just close your eyes for a second, if you're in a place where you can safely do that.
Okay.
And I want you to really listen to the scene I'm about to set.
Set the stage for us.
Right. So imagine the sound of wind. But I'm not talking about a gentle breeze rustling the leaves in your backyard,
No, we're talking serious weather.
Exactly. I mean, that deep, rushing, heavy, almost like violent wind that only really exists high up in mountain passes.
Yeah, that howling sound.
Right. So you are standing right in the middle of the White Mountains of New Hampshire, and it's dawn. The temperature is, it's hovering right near freezing.
Bitterly cold.
Bitterly cold. The light is just barely starting to break, kind of creeping over these vast, rugged, entirely untamed peaks of granite and pine. And then rising out of that absolute unforgiving wilderness, you see it.
It is such an incredibly striking, almost jarring visual to start a story with.
It really throws you off balance because what you are looking at is this massive, elegant, like blindingly white hotel.
A literal palace.
Yeah, honestly, a hotel doesn't even do it justice. I mean, it looks like a European palace just dropped out of the sky.
Completely out of place.
Exactly. It has this brilliant, sprawling red roof, these impossibly tall windows, and it is sitting there just entirely alone in a valley.
But it doesn't look like it belongs in the wilderness at all.
Not even a little bit. It looks like it should be in, I don't know, the middle of Paris or Vienna, and yet there it is, dwarfed only by the mountains around it.
Right.
And as you're taking in this sprawling Gilded Age masterpiece, your eyes are drawn up to just one window.
Out of what? Hundreds?
Literally hundreds of windows, but you're drawn to just one specific room, room 314.
Room 314.
And sitting there in the window, illuminated by that harsh early morning mountain light, is a woman. And she is just quietly, calmly brushing her hair.
Wow, that image, that intense juxtaposition of this wild, untamed landscape outside and this very quiet, intimate, domestic moment happening inside a palatial fortress, that is the crux of what we are unpacking today.
Welcome to another deep dive.
Glad to be here.
Today, we are pulling from a really fascinating set of source materials, specifically excerpts from a documentary piece titled The Princess of Room 314, Mount Washington Hotel Hauntings.
It's a great source.
It is, but if you think you know where this is going based on the title, I promise you, you don't.
No, it completely subverts your expectation.
Right. So the mission today is to explore a ghost story that entirely defies all the usual horror tropes. We aren't going to be talking about, rattling chains or vengeance from beyond the grave or demons lurking in the basement boiler room.
None of the standard Hollywood stuff.
Exactly. We are going to dig into the history of the Mount Washington Hotel in Bretton Woods, the sheer, unfathomable audacity of the Gilded Age luxury it represents, and, well, a haunting that seems to have been born not out of terror, but out of a profound, enduring love for a physical space.
I think if you're listening to this right now, you probably have a mental image of what a haunted house looks like, right?
Oh, for sure. Keeling wallpaper, dark corridors.
Right. Pop culture has trained us to expect decaying Victorian mansions, places that are born of trauma or violence. But what we have here is it's an architectural and a psychological time capsule of extreme luxury.
Which is so weird to think about.
It is. And the fundamental question we'll be exploring is how physical spaces, and specifically these massive isolated hotels from a very particular era of history, how they have this capacity to preserve the emotional residue of the people who inhabited them.
Like a sponge.
Exactly. They capture moments in time, obviously, but they also seem to capture the deep, deep attachments people form with them.
I want to pump the brakes right away, though, because before we can even begin to understand the ghost brushing her hair in the window, we have to understand the sheer mechanical scale of the space she is haunting.
The building itself is a character in the story.
It really is. I mean, how does a building like this even come to exist in the first place? Our source material introduces us to a man named Joseph Stickney.
Right, the visionary.
Yeah, he was a wealthy railroad industrialist, and between the years 1900 and 1902, he builds this place. The text literally calls it a palace in the wilderness.
Which is not hyperbole, by the way.
Not at all.
To understand Joseph Stickney and this hotel, you really have to understand the era he was operating in.
The Gilded Age.
Right, the Gilded Age in America. Roughly the late 19th century up to the early 1900s. It was a period of unprecedented, explosive industrial growth, but it was also an era of massive wealth concentration.
Yeah, the inequality was staggering.
Unbelievable. You had these titans of industry railroads, steel, coal-amassing fortunes that are almost impossible to comprehend today. And crucially, there was no federal income tax yet.
Wait, no income tax at all?
Not like we know it today. So they basically had virtually unlimited capital.
Wow. So they had all this money and literally nothing stopping them from spending it in most extravagant ways possible.
Precisely. And in Gilded Age high society, wealth wasn't meant to be hidden in a bank account. It was meant to be displayed.
Right, you had to show off.
It was an era of conspicuous consumption. You proved your status by building summer cottages in Newport that were actually like 70-room mansions, or by throwing lavish banquets. But Stickney took this mindset and pointed it at the wilderness.
Yeah, and I was trying to put this into a modern context for myself earlier, like building a Gilded Age luxury resort in the incredibly rugged, unforgiving terrain of the White Mountains in the year 1902.
It's insane.
It is. It's almost like a tech billionaire trying to build a 5-star, all-inclusive luxury resort on Mars today.
That is a brilliant analogy.
It's just pure, unadulterated audacity. I mean, just think about the logistics. Transporting the materials before modern trucking.
Right, you're dealing with horse-drawn wagons.
Exactly! Horses and specialized rail spurs. The sheer human will required to carve out a piece of untamed granite and drop a literal palace right in the middle of it. Why do it?
Why?
Like, why build it there of all places? I would have just built it in Boston.
But Boston wouldn't make the point he was trying to make.
What do you mean?
The appeal wasn't, in spite of the rugged wilderness, the appeal was exactly that contrast. During the Gilded Age, true luxury was about demonstrating mastery over your environment.
Oh, I see. Flexing on nature itself.
Exactly. You take this untamed, wild, completely inhospitable mountain landscape where winter temperatures routinely plunge way below zero, and right in the middle of it, you place extreme, highly refined luxury.
It's the ultimate power move.
For instance, the source mentions the hotel featured a heated indoor swimming pool.
Wait, hold on. A heated indoor swimming pool in 1902 in the mountains.
Yes.
How is that even physically possible?
It was an absolute engineering marvel.
Yeah.
To achieve that, you aren't just hooking up a modern electric water heater.
Right.
You are talking about massive industrial-scale coal furnaces operating in the basement round the clock. You're talking about complex steam pipe systems weaving through the foundation of the building.
That sounds dangerous, honestly.
It was incredibly complex. They even had to import specialized Italian artisans just to do the plaster and masonry work.
Wait, why Italian artisans specifically?
Because they needed absolute precision to ensure the humidity from an indoor pool didn't rot the wooden superstructure of the rest of the hotel. It was a logistical nightmare.
So let me get this straight. You have guys shoveling tons of coal into a roaring furnace in the basement just so the upper crust of society can take a warm dip while a literal blizzard rages outside.
Exactly. You have to imagine the juxtaposition for a guest in 1902. Outside, you have freezing mountain winds, deep snowdrifts, wolves, bears, and completely impassable terrain.
Total wilderness.
Right. But inside, you are swimming in warm water, surrounded by imported Italian marble, dining in grand rooms lit by thousands of the very first electric light bulbs.
Which was brand new technology at the time.
And eating food that had to be brought in on private refrigerated rail cars. It is a booming statement of power. It says, we can bring the absolute height of human civilization and comfort to the most remote corners of the earth.
Okay, I get the flex. It's a massive flex of industrial might. But, what makes the Mount Washington Hotel unique in our source material isn't just this display of wealth.
No, it's not.
It's the motivation behind it.
Yeah.
This wasn't just a business venture for Joseph Stickney to show off to his railroad buddies.
Right.
The text makes it very, very clear that the foundational element of the hotel was deeply, deeply personal. He built this massive resort specifically for his wife, Caroline Foster Stickney.
And that detail is everything.
It is. She wasn't just the wife of the owner who showed up for the ribbon cutting. The source notes she was interwoven into the hotel's identity from the blueprint stage.
He designed it around her.
Yeah, he built special accommodations just for her. Beyond the indoor pool, there was a private dining room created exclusively for her use, which the staff and guests still refer to today as the princess room.
That changes the entire complexion of the building, doesn't it?
Completely.
It goes from being a monument to capitalism to being a monument to a specific person. It's an act of devotion rendered in stone, wood, and glass. Every architectural choice, every luxury was curated with Caroline in mind.
It's kind of romantic in a very intense way.
Very intense. When you understand that, The foundation of the hotel shifts. Despite its colossal, sprawling size, it possesses a deeply intimate core.
Okay, I hear what you're saying, but I have to push back on that intimate core idea pretty hard.
Oh, why is that?
While it was still a public hotel, it wasn't a private home. They had hundreds of guests. And beyond that, the text mentions that it later became the site of massive, world-altering historical events, most notably the 1944 Bretton Woods Conference.
I asked the conference.
That is a gigantic historical footprint. We are talking about 730 delegates from 44 different nations cramming into this hotel for 3 weeks during World War II to literally design the post-war global economic order.
They mapped out the financial future of the world there.
Exactly. They created the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank inside those walls. So you have world leaders shouting over each other, economic policy being shaped, typewriters clacking all night. That is a very public, very global, very chaotic space. How can you call that an intimate monument? It sounds like a convention center.
I completely see your point, and you're right that the 1944 Bretton Woods Conference cemented the hotel's place in macro history.
Yeah.
If you open a textbook, that's what the Mount Washington is known for.
Right. It's famous for economics, not romance.
But think about how buildings operate on different frequencies. The Bretton Woods Conference was 3 weeks of intense, chaotic global importance. But what our source material focuses on, and what the local lore focuses on, is the personal tragedy that predates all of that.
The tragedy that happened right at the beginning.
Exactly. A tragedy which fundamentally shifted the hotel's destiny in the minds of the people who actually live there.
You mean Joseph's death?
Yes. Joseph Stickney dies suddenly in 1903.
Which is just wild to me. The hotel opened in July of 1902. He dies a year later.
The whiplash of that timeline is just breathtaking.
It really is.
Think about the energy expended. You spend years planning, fighting the elements, importing materials, and building this impossible palace in the wilderness. You pour a vast chunk of your fortune and your devotion into creating this perfect, isolated space for your wife.
All that effort.
You finally open the doors, unveiling the grandest resort in New England, a true triumph of the era. And 12 months later, he's gone.
So if I'm Caroline, my husband just spent millions of dollars building me this castle in the absolute middle of nowhere, and then he immediately dies.
It's devastating.
I think a lot of people, and if you are listening to this, you might be thinking the exact same thing. You would expect a grieving widow to abandon this massive, highly demanding project.
That would be the logical move, wouldn't it?
Yeah. It was his vision. He built it for her. He dies. You sell it to a hospitality conglomerate, or you just walk away. The memories alone would be suffocating. The sheer upkeep of a Gilded Age resort in the mountains without him? No, thank you.
Most people would have sold it immediately.
But instead, according to the source material, she doesn't run. Her connection to it only deepens.
It doesn't break her connection to the place. It seems to forge it into something permanent, and it's crucial to understand her position. As a wealthy Gilded Age widow, she had ultimate freedom.
She could do whatever she wanted.
She could have moved to New York, to London, to Paris. She had the resources to go anywhere and completely reinvent herself.
And her life does go on. I mean, the text tells us she eventually enters a completely new chapter. She remarries. And she doesn't just marry another American industrialist. She marries a French royal, Jean-Baptiste Marie de Faucigny-Lucinge.
Say that 5 times fast.
I know, right? And through this marriage, she officially earns the moniker that will define her entire legacy, the princess. She literally becomes European royalty.
Which is a huge status bump, even for a Gilded Age heiress.
Exactly. Now, if I become a French princess, I am moving to a chateau in France. But she doesn't leave the White Mountains behind. Her identity remains stubbornly anchored to the Mount Washington Hotel.
And this is where the narrative begins to shift. From a historical biography into the paranormal. But it does so in a very specific, unique way that completely upends our cultural vocabulary for hauntings.
Oh, absolutely. Because when we talk about ghosts, it's usually dark, violent, and terrifying, right?
Oh,
It's a poltergeist throwing dishes against a wall. It's a spirit trapped in agony, reliving a murder. It's a vengeful entity trying to drive the living out of a house so they can rot in peace.
Exactly. Most ghost stories in popular culture are born from deep trauma. They're born from sudden violence or from unfinished angry business. The spirit is trapped against their will.
Like they're a prisoner.
Right. But what is so fascinating here is that the descriptions of Princess Caroline's reported presence completely defy that traditional lore.
The text is very explicit about this. It says her presence is, quote, not described as violent.
No, not at all.
Instead, guests and staff describe her over the decades as Regal, calm, and deeply tied to the hotel she loved. It is a haunting of affection.
A haunting of affection. I really love that phrasing. It reframes the entire concept of the haunting.
It makes it almost sweet.
It does. She isn't trapped there because of a tragedy, even though her husband's early death was undoubtedly tragic. She isn't lingering because of unfinished business or some curse. She is framed in the lore purely as an expression of enduring affection.
She's there because she wants to be.
Precisely. She didn't want to leave in life, and so she didn't leave in death because she was fundamentally at peace there. The hotel was her sanctuary, her monument, her domain. Why would a princess abandon her castle?
I want to pause here and ask you, the listener, to really think about this for a second because it's a crazy concept. Have you ever loved a physical place so much? Maybe it was a childhood home with a specific creak in the floorboards on the stairs, or a vacation cabin you went to every summer where the air smelled just right, or even just a perfectly curated room in your apartment that you painted yourself. Have you ever loved a space so deeply that you felt a piece of your actual identity was permanently anchored to the architecture?
That's a great question to ponder.
Right. Where if you had to pack up and leave it, you felt like you were leaving a limb behind. That is the level of connection we are talking about here with Caroline and this massive hotel.
It is a profoundly human feeling, and it speaks to the psychology of how we interact with our environments. We project ourselves onto our spaces.
Leave our mark on them.
We arrange our furniture, our art, our lighting to reflect our inner lives. And when a space is built specifically for you from the bedrock up to cater to your every comfort and desire, as the Mount Washington was for Caroline, the boundary between the person and the place becomes incredibly porous.
It blurs together.
Exactly. Where does Caroline end and the hotel begin? The idea that her consciousness, her energy, would simply choose to remain in the space where she felt most herself? I mean, it is almost a comforting thought rather than a frightening one.
I guess it's comforting in theory, but, in practice, it's still super eerie.
Oh, without a doubt.
Which brings us to the actual mechanics of this haunting. How exactly does an affectionate haunting manifest to the people who are just trying to enjoy a ski weekend at the resort today?
Let's get into the specifics.
Yeah, let's look at the specific sensory phenomena reported in the source material. Because before we jump to the paranormal, I want to see if we can explain any of this rationally.
That's a great approach. We should always look for the logical explanation first.
Mm-hmm.
And the source outlines a very distinct pattern of experiences that guests and staff have reported for decades.
Right, let's start with the general atmospheric sightings that happen in the main areas outside of her private room. We have reports of an elegant woman in Victorian dress roaming the corridors at a distance.
A classic apparition.
We have sudden cold spots in the hallways. We have lights turning on and off by themselves, faucets acting on their own. And this one always gets me. The distinct, unsettling feeling of being watched in empty, long corridors. Now, I have to assume some of this is just the reality of a massive old building, right?
We absolutely have to ground this in science first. If we break those phenomena down, they are classic paranormal markers, but they also have very mundane mechanical explanations, especially in a building from 1902.
Like the plumbing and electrical stuff.
Take the flickering lights and the faucets. Early 20th century plumbing and electrical systems are notoriously temperamental.
Let's talk about the plumbing. Faucets turning on by themselves. That sounds super spooky.
Well, think about the physics of cast iron pipes in a mountain environment. You have extreme temperature fluctuations. Pipes expand when hot water rushes through them and contract when they cool down.
Okay, science class, I'm with you.
This creates pressure imbalances. Sometimes a worn valve will finally give way under a sudden pressure shift, causing water to run. Or there's a water hammer effect, where a sudden change in water flow causes a loud, echoing bang in the pipes that sounds exactly like heavy footsteps on a floorboard.
Okay, that makes sense. A water hammer can totally sound like someone stomping around upstairs. What about the lights flickering?
The hotel was built during the transition to electricity. While it's been updated, old massive buildings often have complex, layered electrical grids. Minor voltage drops, especially in a remote grid out in the mountains, can easily cause lights to flicker or dim momentarily.
So ghosts might just be a bad fuse.
Exactly. And as for feeling watched in empty corridors, that brings us to the psychology of pareidolia and sensory deprivation.
Oh, I've heard of this. Let's unpack that. What exactly is pareidolia?
Pareidolia is the psychological phenomenon where the human brain, which is essentially an advanced pattern recognition machine, tries to find familiar shapes, specifically faces and human figures, in random stimuli.
Like seeing faces in the clouds? Or toast?
Perfectly said. When you are walking down a long, dimly lit hotel corridor late at night, your brain is starved for visual input. The shadows are long, it's quiet. Your brain goes into overdrive trying to interpret the shadows.
Trying to keep you safe.
Right. A Victorian chair at the end of the hall, cast in moonlight, suddenly looks exactly like a woman in a long dress. The feeling of being watched is an evolutionary survival mechanism. In a massive, quiet space, our brains heighten our awareness, essentially tricking us into feeling a presence just to keep us on our toes.
I love that. I love knowing the science behind it because once you strip away the plumbing glitches and the brain playing tricks on us in the dark, you are left with a phenomena that can't be easily explained away by a loose valve.
The things that don't fit the rational mold.
Exactly. The text mentions a few sensory details that are much, much harder to dismiss.
The auditory and olfactory clues. These are the ones that elevate the experience from an old, creaky building to a genuine haunting.
Yes. The text mentions light taps on guest doors when no one is in the hallway,
Right.
footsteps on staircases after midnight, and not the banging water hammer kind, but distinct, measured steps. And the strangest one, the sudden, inexplicable scent of floral perfume blooming in a room where no one is present and then vanishing.
Let's focus on those three things. Taps on a door, measured footsteps on a stair, a hint of perfume. Notice the quality of these occurrences.
What do you mean?
These are not the sounds of a monster. These are deeply human domestic sounds. They are the sounds of someone going about their daily life or nightly life in a grand home.
Oh, I see.
A light tap on a door is polite. It's an inquiry. Are you awake? Do you need anything? May I come in? Footsteps on a staircase after midnight imply a quiet stroll, a restlessness that is peaceful, not frantic. And the floral perfume.
Smell is so strongly tied to memory, right?
It is the sense most closely linked to the amygdala and hippocampus, the brain regions that handle emotion and memory. For a space to suddenly smell of Victorian floral perfume is an incredibly intimate intrusion into the present.
It's very personal.
It's not just a loud noise, it's a complex chemical signature from another era.
It's literally like you're walking through a cloud of someone else's memory. But I have to say, the text also mentions a playfully eerie detail that I find completely maddening.
Oh, the disappearing object.
Less. Guests noticing personal objects in their rooms disappearing, only to later reappear in the exact same spot they were left.
That one is so fascinating to me.
I have to say, if I put my car keys down on the dresser and they vanish and I tear the room apart looking for them, and then 3 hours later they're sitting exactly where I originally left them, I'm not entirely sure I'd call that regal and calm.
No.
No. I'd call it incredibly frustrating. I'd be at the front desk demanding a refund.
It is deeply mischievous. But again, look at the lack of malice.
True. Nothing is broken.
Exactly. The objects aren't thrown across the room. They aren't hidden to cause harm or make you trip. They are removed, perhaps examined, and neatly returned. It establishes a dynamic of a host checking in on the visitors.
A host.
Yeah, it's almost as if Caroline is inspecting the belongings of a guest in her home, curious about what modern travelers bring with them, and then politely putting them back.
A polite host who just happens to be invisible. But here's where it gets really interesting, and where the story shifts from, fleeting glimpses in the hallway to direct, sustained encounters.
The epicenter of it all.
Yes, the source material points us to a very specific epicenter for this legend, the crown jewel of the haunting, Room 314.
The room that gives our source material its title, the Princess of Room 314.
This was her private suite, and the text says that guests staying in this room have reported waking up in the middle of the night to find Caroline seated at the edge of the bed.
Just sitting there.
Just sitting there. Sometimes, the text says, she's simply watching quietly in the dark. Other times, she is sitting there, methodically brushing her hair.
It is an incredibly striking juxtaposition of pure terror and absolute serenity.
Wait, hold on. I get that brushing hair is a historically calming, serene routine.
Right.
But if I wake up at 3 a.m. in a strange hotel room and a transparent Victorian woman is sitting on the foot of my bed brushing her hair, my brain isn't registering comfort or serenity.
Well, of course not for you.
I am diving out the window. I am running down the hall in my pajamas. How is anyone finding this serene? It's universally terrifying. It triggers every primal alarm bell in our evolutionary biology. There is an intruder in my sleeping space.
You are absolutely right that the guest is terrified. The terror belongs entirely to the living person in the bed because they are encountering the impossible unknown.
Okay, fair.
But the point the source material is making is about the emotional state of the spirit. Princess Caroline is entirely at ease.
She's just chillin'.
Exactly. She isn't looming over the bed. She isn't screaming. She isn't trying to scare the guest out of the room. The guest just happens to be sleeping in her bed while she goes about her standard nightly routine.
Like we're the intruders.
Precisely. It's like two different timelines are overlapping, and she is just living her life on her timeline, completely unbothered by the modern tourist shivering under the duvet.
Okay, that makes sense. The horror is one-sided. And you just hit on the most crucial detail about room 314, which honestly blew my mind when I read it.
The bed.
Yes. The source notes that the room still contains her original four-poster bed.
Which, from both a psychological and a paranormal perspective, is a massive detail.
I want you to speculate on this for a second, because the text mentions that this original bed adds to the eerie feeling that the past has not fully left. What is it about physical objects, specifically a bed, that anchors a story like this?
It's a great question.
We talked earlier about the building being a massive structure, but is the bed the actual terminal? Like, if the hotel is a giant battery of energy, is her original bed the positive terminal where all that energy discharges?
Let's challenge the battery metaphor for a second.
Okay.
A battery stores energy to be depleted, to be used up. I think a better framework, one that connects more deeply with folklore and psychology, is the idea of physical objects as anchors, or even sponges.
Sponges.
Let's look at the bed. In 1902, a grand four-poster bed wasn't just a piece of furniture you bought at a big box store. It was a massive financial investment. It was handcrafted, heavy, deeply personal.
It was a statement piece.
It was. And a bed is arguably the most intimate piece of furniture a human being interacts with. It is where you sleep, where you dream, where you are at your most physically vulnerable. It is where you recover from illness, and historically, it's where many people died.
So it absorbs a lot of life.
It absorbs a lifetime of a person's physical and emotional presence.
So by keeping Caroline's exact original four-poster bed in room 314, instead of swapping it out for a modern king-size mattress, the hotel is basically maintaining a shrine.
It serves as a literal invitation for the memory to remain. If you view this through a paranormal lens, you might argue that the dense antique wooden frame of the bed literally holds her energetic residue.
It grounds her there.
It grounds her spirit to that specific spot on the earth. But even if you look at it purely psychologically, the effect is staggering.
How so?
For a modern guest to check in, walk into room 314, and know they are sleeping in the dead princess's actual bed, that primes their brain to experience her presence.
Oh, absolutely. I'd be paranoid before I even turned off the lights.
You are lying on the exact same footprint where she lived and breathed. Every creak of the ancient wood, every cold draft sweeping through the room is instantly contextualized through the legend of Caroline. The physical object collapses the 120-year distance between 1902 and today.
That is heavy. So what does this all mean for the larger structure? Why does this specific hotel, out of all the old buildings and inns scattered across New England, have such a strong paranormal reputation that it actively attracts TV crews and ghost hunters?
It's a combination of factors.
It can't just be about Caroline and her antique bed. You could move that bed to a museum in Boston, and I doubt the museum would suddenly be haunted in the same way. It has to be about the architecture, the geography, the very nature of the Mount Washington building itself.
The source material addresses this beautifully when it discusses why this hotel feels so haunted to everyone who walks in. And it points to two key environmental factors: scale and atmosphere.
Let's tackle the atmosphere first, specifically the geography. The text points out a critical detail. It is a massive early 20th century resort built in a remote mountain setting, which gives it the feel of a place cut off from the outside world.
So isolation.
Right, that isolation has to be the catalyst. I mean, as we talk about this, I keep going back to the sheer size of the building versus its surroundings. If this exact hotel were in downtown Manhattan, surrounded by sirens and yellow cabs, I don't think it would feel haunted at all.
You're exactly right. Isolation is paramount in almost all enduring ghost lore, from The Shining to ancient folklore.
Think about the mechanics of it.
Right. When you are cut off from the outside world, the inside world becomes magnified to a profound degree. Every sound is louder, every shadow stretches further.
It closes in on you.
The Mount Washington Hotel is surrounded by the vast, untamed wilderness of the White Mountains. When the sun goes down, there is no ambient city light to dilute the darkness. There is no background hum of traffic.
It's just pitch black outside.
You are entirely contained within this massive glowing structure in a sea of blackness.
Yeah.
There is nowhere else to go. You are forced to confront the history of the building and the sheer emptiness of its long halls, because it is the only reality available to your senses in that moment.
And then there's the building itself, the scale of it.
Yeah.
It's not a quaint little bed and breakfast. It's a sprawling palatial resort.
Hundreds of rooms.
And the text gives us this incredibly profound list of what happens inside these large historic hotels. It says they feel haunted because they preserve layers of human life, and then it explicitly lists them.
I love this list.
Me too. It says, weddings, deaths, arguments, celebrations, loneliness, and long nights spent in rooms that never truly forget their guests.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, this is the thesis statement for why hotels, more than almost any other type of building, are the perfect breeding ground for ghost stories. Hotels are emotional sponges.
Emotional sponges. I really want to dig into that metaphor because earlier I used the analogy of a battery and you push back on it. Why a sponge?
A sponge implies absorption of all these different liquids, all these different elements, which then get trapped in the fibers.
Okay, let's push on this list the text gave us. A hotel sees weddings, the absolute pinnacle of human joy, hope, stress, and anxiety. It sees deaths, grief, sudden endings, shock.
Right. Intense emotions.
Arguments, betrayal, anger, hushed yelling in a hallway so the neighbors next door don't hear you, celebrations. And then my favorite word in that entire list, loneliness.
The architecture of loneliness in a grand hotel is a very real, very palpable thing.
Tell me more about that.
Well, think about the physics of a natural sea sponge. It takes in ocean water. When you pull it out and it dries, the water evaporates, it's gone. But the sediment, the microscopic salt crystals, the minerals from the water remain embedded deep in the fibrous network of the sponge. It permanently alters the weight and texture of the sponge itself.
That's a great visual.
A hotel operates the same way. People flow in and out, they arrive, they experience intense emotions, and they check out. But the emotional sediment, the joy, the grief, the profound loneliness, gets trapped in the plaster and the woodwork.
That builds up over time.
You could be in a building with 500 other people, surrounded by Gilded Age luxury, dining on fine cuisine, and go back to your room and feel entirely, utterly alone. The contrast between public luxury and private isolation is incredibly sharp in a place like that.
So are we saying that the sheer volume of transient human emotion passing through this fixed, isolated point creates an actual atmosphere you can feel? Like, does a room that has hosted 100 bitter arguments, 50 honeymooners, and 10 people dealing with profound grief over a century just inherently feel heavier or physically different than a brand new room at a Holiday Inn built last year?
From a psychological standpoint, absolutely. Because as we discussed with pareidolia, humans are incredibly perceptive pattern matchers. We pick up on micro clues in our environment.
Like what kind of clues?
When you walk into a space that has been heavily used for over a century, you notice the wear on the floorboards right by the window where people have stood to look at the mountains. You notice the slight sag in the doorframe, the countless layers of paint on the baseboards, the way the acoustics sound slightly muffled.
Subconscious details.
You subconsciously process that thousands of intense human lives have intersected in this exact square footage. The transient nature of a hotel, people arriving, feeling intensely, and leaving within 48 hours creates a massive contrast with the permanent, immovable nature of the granite and wood building.
The building stays while everyone else leaves.
The building absorbs it all and remains stoic. The feeling that history is still active isn't necessarily supernatural. It is an acute sensory awareness of the overwhelming weight of past human experience concentrated in one single spot.
I buy that. The weight of history is heavy. But here's the crazy part. Amidst all those thousands of transient stories, the thousands of delegates from Bretton Woods arguing about the gold standard, the thousands of weddings and ski vacations, Caroline Stickney's story is the one that anchored itself above all the noise.
She became the dominant narrative.
The text explicitly says, Caroline Stickney's room, her bed, and her private spaces still anchor the story people tell about the building. She managed to become the permanent resident in a massive building designed explicitly for temporary guests.
Which is a testament to the power of her initial intention. The building was made for her. Everyone else is just visiting your house.
That's a fun way to look at it.
And that dynamic perfectly sets up the bizarre reality of visiting the Mount Washington Resort today, because it's crucial for you, the listener, to remember that this isn't an abandoned, decaying ruin we are talking about.
No, not at all.
It isn't a roped-off museum where you shuffle through in paper booties and look at things behind glass. It is a fully functioning, highly active, very expensive luxury space.
Right. But what's wild to me is that this isn't some boarded up relic. You can go there right now. If I book a ski trip to the Omni Mount Washington today, I'm stepping right into the middle of this active
You're
legend.
walking into the story.
According to the source, the hotel operates today under the Omni brand. It has the prestigious designation of a National Historic Landmark. And people still flock there in droves year-round for the gorgeous scenery, the massive ski slopes, the golf course, the world-class spa. They're going for modern luxury. They are going for Wi-Fi and hot stone massages.
But the text notes a very interesting operational choice by the management. Think about how most high-end luxury resorts operate.
They want everything perfect, pristine, and relaxing.
Usually, if a hotel has a rumor that a dead woman sits on the beds and watches guests sleep, corporate management sweeps that under the rug immediately to appease skittish guests who are paying top dollar.
Yeah, you don't put that on the brochure.
But the Mount Washington management doesn't do that. They don't hide it. They lean into it completely.
They embrace it. The ghost stories are a foundational part of its marketing and its identity. And Room 314, despite, or honestly more accurately, because of the fact that you might wake up with a ghost brushing her hair at the foot of your bed, remains the most requested, most waitlisted, and most talked about spot in the entire hotel.
Which raises a really fascinating question about human nature, doesn't it? Why do people want that?
It's counterintuitive.
Why do people who are actively seeking a relaxing, expensive luxury vacation go out of their way to request the one room where they're statistically most likely to be terrified in the middle of the night?
I think it's about the duality mentioned in the text. The source describes this balance perfectly. It is a vibrant, bustling luxury resort by day and a haunted, echoing historical landmark by night.
Think about the appeal of that duality for a modern traveler. As modern people, we crave comfort. We are stressed out, and we crave the spa, the fine dining, the heated pools, the plush robes.
We want to be pampered.
We want the luxury that Joseph Stickney envisioned when he carved this place out of the mountain in 1902. But simultaneously, we are bored by the mundane. We crave a connection to the mysterious. We want to feel close to history, not in a dry, reading a plaque on a wall kind of way, but in a visceral, experiential, spine-tingling way.
It's the ultimate contrast.
Exactly. Staying at the Mount Washington Hotel allows guests to experience both those competing desires simultaneously. You can have your deep tissue hot stone massage at 2 p.m., sipping champagne, and then at 2 a.m., you can lie awake in the pitch dark of room 314, listening to the pipes expand, hearing a light tap on the wooden door, and genuinely wondering if the princess has come down the hall to check on you.
It turns a vacation into an event.
It provides a safe thrill. It makes the vacation a narrative. It turns a weekend getaway into an adventure story that you can tell at dinner parties for the rest of your life.
It makes history feel alive, or I guess undead, depending on how you look at it.
Right.
But it's true, it transforms a simple hotel stay into active participation in an ongoing century-old legend. You aren't just a tourist, you become part of the hotel's long list of transient guests who experience something permanent. You step into Caroline's timeline for a night.
And that, ultimately, is the core insight we can draw from this entire documentary piece. We started by looking at a ghost story, but we ended up uncovering an architectural love letter.
Absolutely. To summarize what we've unpacked today in this deep dive, the Mount Washington Hotel isn't scary because of a horrific tragedy. The haunting of Room 314 defies all the horror tropes we've been conditioned to expect.
It's a completely different genre.
It isn't a story of violence or vengeance or some dark demonic energy. It is a haunting born of absolute, unwavering devotion. Caroline Foster Stickney, the princess, became a fundamental part of the hotel's story while she was alive, pouring her identity, her time, and her comfort into its walls.
And she never left.
And according to the legend that persists to this day, she simply remained part of it in death. She found her perfect place in the world, and she decided to stay.
I think the source text summarizes it with a beautiful piece of phrasing that really sticks with you and encapsulates the entire phenomenon.
The line about the places keeping us.
Yes. It says, whether you call it a ghost, a trick of the brain, a memory, or the lingering force of a life once lived in luxury, some places keep their people longer than expected.
Some places keep their people longer than expected. That is just a phenomenal line, and it perfectly captures the romanticism of the Mount Washington. And it leaves me with a final lingering question for you, the listener, to mull over on your own as you go about the rest of your day or as you settle into your own bed tonight.
It's a good one to think about.
We've spent a lot of time talking about how spaces act as sponges for emotion and how Caroline anchored herself to the specific place she loved most.
Right.
If our strongest attachments can truly outlast us, if our devotion and our energy can quite literally soak into the floorboards and the walls of the places we inhabit, what physical spaces in your own life are you pouring so much love, energy, and identity into right now that a piece of you might just stay there forever?
That's a heavy thought.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. We'll see you next time.